Hello everyone, welcome to SwitchUp as we once again look at the scores for every review on the channel last month, the month of course of August. I'll go through each of the games, giving you a brief idea of what the review said and our thoughts on that particular game. The games will be ranked from the lowest score up until the highest score for the month, and I have to say I can't actually remember a month with so many games that got quite a low score. There are a few in there that got quite middling scores before the cream rose to the top and one game got an exceptionally good score. So how did it all pan out? Well, let's find out. Coming in at last place for the month then was a game that I reviewed called Clan N. Now this was a game that really caught my eye when I saw it on the coming soon page back when it released earlier this month. It's a beat 'em up with quite an interesting zoomed out perspective and allows for up to 4-player cooperative play. Whilst the zoom out perspective did allow for some interesting ideas, it did also inadvertently cause a few problems to the classic beat 'em up formula, and whilst the multiplayer mode was fun, I tried it in 3-player with my family. The biggest problem the game has is the number of crashes that I experienced whilst playing it. I think it crashed on me about 4 times during my playthrough, which is just unacceptable. Now I will say that the developers did put a post on the pinned comment for that review stating that there was a patch imminent on the game, and they have since posted again to say that patch has now gone through. I haven't had a chance to try it, I will be honest, so I can't tell you if it's solved the issues, but at least the patch has gone through. In terms of this review though, and the score it got at the time, owing to those problems, it got a SwitchUp score of 59%. And in 8th place for the month then, based on the popular anime series, we had the Fairy Tail game adaptation. This one was reviewed for us by Mark, and whilst he enjoyed the representation of the characters and felt the combat was quite fun, he also found the various fetch quests to be very tedious, but above that, found that the performance was very poor even after a day 1 patch. He did mention that if you are a fan of the show, no doubt you'll still find some enjoyment here, but those tedious fetch quests and that poor performance really did let things down. And then of course if you factor in the price, which as with all Bandai Namco published games is incredibly high, it was very difficult to recommend. With all this in mind, it received a SwitchUp score of 62%. And in 7th place for the month, we had a game called Ageless. Now this is a puzzle platformer of sorts, which sees you using an aging mechanic to try and solve various problems and move on through the levels. Basically you have a bow and shooting arrows at various plants or animals will either age or de-age them. For example, aging a plant may cause it to grow, allowing you to reach a higher platform, whereas de-aging a boar will turn it into a younger version, which is quite aggressive and may well knock down a wall, allowing you to get past. It was an interesting premise and I enjoyed the game for the most part, although unfortunately the controls weren't quite as precise as you would need for the game to be fully enjoyable. Trying to aim the bow didn't always feel as responsive as it had to be for this game to really hit its stride. I would say it's the sort of game that if you find it on sale for a decent price, you'll definitely get a good time out of, but those loose controls did affect it and it got a SwitchUp score of 65%. And score wise, the 6th place game for the month was one of our more recent reviews actually. This was Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered, which was reviewed by a good friend of the channel, Dave Morrish. This of course was an ARPG that came out for the GameCube back in, I believe it was 2004 off the top of my head. And whilst it's received a nice coat of paint in terms of upscaled visuals and does include some new features, Dave found that the gameplay is just too repetitive these days and doesn't hold up very well. Then you factor in that there is no local co-op at all, and he found it difficult to find a match online, albeit that may well have been down to the fact of course this was a review copy given out before the official launch. If you loved it back in the day, no doubt you'll love it still to this day, but there are some very good ARPGs on the Switch and this one doesn't quite stand the test of time. It received a SwitchUp score of 68%. Coming in at 5th place for the month, another game I reviewed, this was called Skully. Now this is an action platformer which sees you taking on the role of a reanimated skull which washed up on an island and is being used by one of the deities of the island to try to get his siblings to stop arguing. Now what this basically equated to in terms of the gameplay was, as I said, an action platformer where you needed to solve environmental puzzles in order to move on, but you could also transform into one of 3 troll-like creatures, each with their own skill set, and would need to do this frequently throughout the levels to get past certain problems. Now I actually found this game quite a lot of fun, and I was very impressed by the controls, which I found very tight and responsive and made controlling Skully quite a joy at times. However, there was one problem with it, and that was that there were certain difficulty spikes, or at least moments of frustration within each level, which would have you pulling your hair out, and a lot of these were caused by certain sections where you played with a fixed camera perspective, which made depth perception hard to gauge and therefore artificially upped the difficulty. If you could get away from these spikes, the game is, as I said, a lot of fun, and I would recommend it on sale or if you can find the physical copy for a low price. Having said that, it does show you the sort of month we've had when you consider this is the 5th best scoring game for the month, and it got a SwitchUp score of 71%. In 4th place for the month then we had Samurai Jack Battle Through Time. This one was reviewed by Mark and is a hack and slash game based on the very popular cartoon. Mark found the combat to be a lot of fun, enjoyed the mechanics, whilst also commenting that there are a ton of locations to visit during the game, and that performance was decent too. On the more negative side, he did say that it gets repetitive the longer you go into the game, and also found some of the controls quite irritating, for example the lock-on mechanic for fighting enemies. A fun game though, and I enjoyed Mark's tagline for his review. He went for Jackie Can, almost. Very droll, son, I like that one. And it got a SwitchUp score of 76%. In 3rd place for the month then was another game based on a TV show. This was Peaky Blinders Mastermind. Now this game is set before the first series of this particular show, and the 10 levels effectively act as a new, unseen if you like, series, which is quite an interesting concept. It sees you taking on the role of Tommy as he returns from war, and you don't have to have seen the show really to understand what the game is all about. What was also an interesting concept was the gameplay itself. Each level had an objective that you needed to meet, but in order to do this successfully, you needed to direct each one of your characters at certain times. To aid you in this, the game introduces an interesting time shifting mechanic whereby you can control one character, carry out an action, and then shift time backwards to another character to then go and interact or benefit from the consequence of whatever it is the first character did. Quite a unique concept, I'm sure you will agree, and one that Mark felt was of great benefit to the game. He also found that the levels and the set pieces were very complex, again adding to the gameplay, and it wasn't priced too high either, definitely another positive. On the more negative side, there is some lag later in the game, and it could have perhaps benefited from some sort of sandbox mode as well for when you finish with it, but all in all a good game, and it received a SwitchUp score of 79%. In 2nd place for the month then, the most recent review on the channel, this is Windbound. Windbound is a survival game which sees you playing as Kara, a young lady that washes up on an island and must use the resources that she finds to try and stay alive. Again, this one was reviewed by Mark, and he really enjoyed the gameplay in this game, that survival element, and whilst quite a few people in the comment section said they felt the game was too difficult, Mark is made of strong stuff. He's the sort of person that eats thunder and burps lightning, so that was not a problem for him. On a more serious side though, he mentioned that if you play stealthily, then you'll have more success. If you go in all guns blazing against a board with just a stick to your name, chances are you're gonna die. If you stand atop a mountain and shoot it with your bow and arrow, you'll be okay. You get the idea. He also enjoyed the sailing aspect to the game and loved the game's visuals, although he did report that it crashed a few times on him and there were some visual quirks that he didn't appreciate so much. He has said to me since, in fact I spoke to him today, that when you complete the game or when you get to the very last checkpoint, it doesn't then let you return back past that point, and you are kind of stuck at the end game and can't then go and continue exploring, which seems like quite a flaw in its design, so I will bring that up now given the chance with this monthly score roundup video. All in all though, Mark really enjoyed this one and it got a SwitchUp score of 81%. And the first place game for the month then in terms of its score, this was Phenotopia. This is an action adventure game with elements that would lend itself towards a Metroidvania. You play as Gale, and as you move through the levels you will be picking up stronger weapons, as well as being able to increase the size of your stamina bar through particular vials that you will find as you play. Stylistically, this game is quite similar in some respects to the early Zelda games, especially the second Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. There are a number of dungeons to make your way through, and some really challenging boss fights, which is a plus on the whole, although there are some difficulty spikes in the game, some of which relate to those boss fights, which can make it frustrating in places. Performance of the game is really solid and it's just a visual treat, a real charmer, a game that you can have a great deal of fun with, and as I said, the cream most definitely rose to the top this month, because this game knocked it out of the park in terms of what everything else scored, with a score of 92%. So there you have it, there is our roundup of every game reviewed on the channel in this past month. If you do want to watch any of the reviews and get more information on the games mentioned, the links to every single one of these will be in that top pinned comment. Please feel free to peruse at your leisure. Please do let me know if any of these games that you picked up, what was your impression, did you enjoy them? Stick it all in the comment section below. A quick thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, stay safe, and until next time, happy gaming.